Do you want to spend a little bit more time on
I
the?
want to spend more time. I want to get into that book. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up and say, okay, we were talking about the 8 stages of decline in a civilization, and then we were talking then with about the decline of nations, as written by Father Knoll, and I'd like to pick up again with that here with Alex. So what you read the other things? How do you want to dive into that?
Well, let's continue to take a look at some of the conclusions that Father Knoll.
His observations he was making.
Yeah, let's take a look at that, and we skim through that and have conversations.
Okay, we'll finish up on those, then we'll talk about how this is applicable in our day and why this matters, because these cycles do, they have been consistent in the coming and the going. The 8 stages that I talked about, and this too. History always repeats itself.
Yes.
From this thing, because we don't change, our situations do. But our situation now, like I said, we're accelerated due to the convergence of technology.
Right.
He's talking about how economics and other factors play into these things as complicating factors.
Yeah, sure.
And here's another one he didn't see.
That's interesting.
Was the internet and the cell phones.
Right.
And so this is something that layer on top of it. That puts his arguments on steroids.
Right. He could get that.
But
He could have gotten that
accelerant.
message out immediately.
Well, and this is why, but what disrupted his message going out was World War II breaking out. And
1941.
and so the church and everyone's social programs and all like that were distracted. They weren't concerning about that because they were more concerned about eating, and taking care of the home front, making sure that they didn't go without so much of it. They were, they had to conserve rubber, they had to conserve, wood and metals, everything was all confiscated.
Sure, and then they're still in the midst of the Great Depression, even though this war starts. They're coming out of the Great Depression.
Oh, yeah.
But they're still canning. Nobody has a lot of excess.
My mom said that the Depression really didn't end until after World War II was over, and then the
washing machines,
and then the industry was able to retool itself back to commercial goods, and that's when all these these Dr. Seuss Thneeds, the automatic washers, and they went from the ringer types to the agitator types.
Sure, you could, right.
And that was how that one. Sliced bread had come out in the 1920s.
But you know something I noticed about washing machines is that because my poor daughter does laundry constantly, and I'm thinking the washing machine is supposed to release you from having to do laundry, but because of excess. 2 kids, a husband, herself, and
multiple changes of clothes, and things aren't being worn.
This is crazy. The extra change. I mean, this thing is every day she's folding. I'm thinking that excess is really bondage to the washing machine.
Right, and our expectations on cleanliness and our own patterns of behavior.
Sure,
you can't have a little smudge of tomato soup on your shirt. Oh, you got to go change that. Why? He's just going to wreck the next one too.
Right.
He's not done with dinner.
No, you're right. Right. You'd go along for another couple, 2-3 days, and then you would throw it in the wash or something.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, this is preposterous.
Okay. So let me start this one up. We'll get ourselves back on. Okay. Hello, everybody. Larry Young here again with another segment of OLaMan Living Life with Purity. And as usual this week, I'm back in the studio here with Alex Fiato. Say hello, Alex.
Good to be here.
Oh, a different take-up. I didn't know what you're going to come
I like to mix it up, Larry, because you mix it up and they really start to pay attention.
Keeping me on my toes, are you? So, well, anyway, we were talking about the 8 stages of decay in civilizations and how it runs into the decline of nations in a book that was written by Father John Knoll, or Bishop John Knoll, I think at that time, on his way to being an Archbishop John Knoll, the Fort Wayne South Bend Diocese. But he was the guy that brought us the Sunday Visitor and other types of programs that helped gather organization into the North American Catholic Church primarily, but I think a lot of his things went worldwide in time. But he was a great thinker. He was a model maker as far as thinking about how tendencies were in society, in our culture. And so he was always kind of ahead of the curve on these things. And he was always trying to call things out and try to prepare people for what he saw coming spiritually, economically. I mean, the guy was multifaceted.
Politically.
I mean, he was a dynamic. He was one of these.
No doubt about it, one of the great minds of the century.
He wasn't an Elon Musk, but he was very much a thinker type, but I don't know what he could have done if he gave him more chemistry classes. He was just a guy who could absorb knowledge and process it.
Absolutely.
He was in a class by himself. And so Alex had gotten into this particular book, The Decline of Nations, The Cure, and
Cause.
The Cause and the Cure, correct, thank you. And so we're going to continue on with that. Alex is going to describe more of the things that Archbishop Knoll was seeing at the time before the breakout of World War II with the U.S. involvement. Things had already been going on in Europe at that time with Germany pairing up with Russia, doing the invasion of Poland and things like that. And I think that was, as we were talking, was one of the catalysts that really caught the attention of the folks in the United States. Said, hey, this guy ain't who we thought he was. We better be careful.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to turn it back over to Alex here to kind of get us ready. We'll have a discussion about how things that were happening previous to the buildup of World War II in this country have happened and how it played out, and how things are seeming to ramp up again in this same cycle of that I had been talking about with the 8 stages of a decline of a civilization, and here the decline of a nation, basically the same thing. It all comes down to spiritual fortitude and heroic virtue being abandoned. And so I'll turn things back over to my friend Alex.
And some of the conclusions that were made in Archbishop Knoll's book about the decline of nations, its causes and its cures, he addressed the political aspects of that. He addressed the educational aspects of that. He addressed the aspects in the Catholic religion, the things that were going on in the religion that was working against the health of the nations and stuff. And pretty much Larry covered it in the 1960 version of what Father Knoll was saying. But Father Knoll was talking about, in his conclusions, he said, concerning nations, powerful nations may subdue the weaker, but they will not extinguish either their nationalism or their hatreds. External peace can quite consistently coexist with the internal rebellion. There must be a bond by which the many nations can be united in peace, and there is no conceivable bond other than a spiritual one, such as the bond as united the many nation groups in past centuries. The people of all nations must have some common interest, which means more to them than their nationalism. And that common interest would be a common religion, obliging all to love one another, as children of the same Heavenly Father, destined for the same blessed eternal fraternalization. So Father Knoll is saying one of the cures, there must be a bond, a spiritual bond, grounded in Christ, that brings nations together in brotherhood. It can't be a secular, liberty, freedom, justice, like they had proposed in France during that revolution, because none of that occurred. It was off with the head, and it was a very disturbing time for one of the.
You're talking about the Robespierre and things like that.
That's
that
right.
Were going on, right? Yeah.
And they used to call France the nation that embraced the Mother of God in the Christian religion. It was one of the beautiful stars from heaven that they embraced her, and
but they didn't want to do that.
No,
because it wasn't putting power into their hands,
right?
And that was why they had a disdain for God and religion in general,
and they were warned
because they wanted to have the state, and that was like the first attempt, I think, at the globalization.
Do you think that was the French Revolution?
Well, they've tried it under different tactics and different labels, but it's all basically the same seed that's coming out. And now what they're trying to do now with this Noel was correct in the spiritual aspect that everything has to have a common, there has to be a common energy and a common belief and a common agreement of things. But they've tried the religion, but that's been shut down so much because the buffeting up of the Muslim type of thing is a counter insurgency to the Christianity in the world, because the Christianity has been rebuked by some of the industrialists. And I think what happened with when the economic collapse, the bank collapse of 2008 brought along that international monetary emergency, that was when Obama and the rest of the elites around the world, the Bundaberg Society, these type of people, decided now is time to re-invoke this globalization, to have this one world order. But it wasn't going to have God or Jesus or any kind of spiritual center of gravity. It was going to be a state and this dependence upon the state as the good in our world. That was what was being put forward. And right now, we've got a man in the president's office right now who is upending all that right now. And that's where a lot of this anger and frustration, these
You're probably right.
words
Yeah,
of vitriol
sure.
coming out of, because he's suspending and destroying a lot of what they tried to lay out in 2008 using the monetary system. He's using the monetary system in a different way, using these tariffs.
Right.
He says, you want to play ball? Come, we'll talk. I'm going to have a little bit different rules for you than I am for this guy. Maybe we'll all have the same set of rules, but we're not there yet. And I think this is really kind of magic.
Is he going to do away with the Federal Reserve, you think?
Well, the Federal Reserve is kind of doing away with itself at this point.
Thank you very much,
by
yeah.
not stepping up. And they're all part of this one world order type of thing. So they're all hanging on to try.
It's happening as we speak. He doesn't even have to dismiss them.
Well, he's got to play his card when the right time comes.
Wow.
His name is Trump for a reason. You don't play that Trump card until you're ready.
Is this guy that smart? Does Trump really have that? Or do you think the divine intervention of the Holy Spirit gives him some underpinning?
Well, there's some of that, and I think there's guidance coming from it. But I think the guy has been saying this stuff since the 1980s. If you go back and watch his interviews,
Yeah, you were saying
he's been talking about this. He's a Wharton School grad.
Okay.
And so they're very heavy, deep thinkers.
Okay.
And he's doing some thinking right now, especially with the China play, that people can't quite really understand. But he is really taking it to China right now in a way that they can't fight back. They can have all the missiles and all the armaments they want, but if they're
you're right.
Their young people in China are not working.
You got billions of people who don't want you to be in power once
they've got empty cities.
You're right.
They've got empty cities that they built for.
He's got problems. Don't mean you got bombs.
They got a lot of problems.
What are you going to do with the bombs?
Well, the bombs are the bombs, but you throw a bomb, there's always going to be payback. You can't get away with any bad actions these days because everything's under surveillance. So, a conventional war is not going to be fought. It's not going to be troops on the ground so much until you go into occupy an area. Drone fighting is going to be the key. And, we're into a whole different realm of things. So a lot of these things that we're talking about from the historical perspectives are accurate because they're dealing with an element in our life, in our world that doesn't change. And that's the human species. We're not that developed compared to people from 200 years ago. The only thing that's different is our information stream and the influences in technology and things like that. And one of the things about what Archbishop John Knoll was talking about at this time was very, very accurate, and he was following the trends. But when he was talking about that, he didn't know about these and what the implications of the internet and communication devices would do to the human condition and the speed at which things can change. And I've been telling people on here that the world is going to change, and it's going to change in an instant. And it's going to change through these devices. And the same thing with the collapse of the church is going to happen in an instant. The structure is already weakened. okay, because of the same things that we're facing the world with these eight stages.
So it's like a planned
are also
demolition.
the same things that are going in with the administration of the church. You and I were talking last night about what would happen if and when Pope Francis is replaced. And I said, probably not a whole lot of difference. And you
Because
said,
who-
why? I said, because it's not just the Pope, it's the whole administration. You want to talk about a deep state.
They've got it.
There's such a deep state at the Vatican right now. It's not going to change. They are entrenched. And it's a problem that needs to be acknowledged and dealt with, because these guys get lifetime positions at the Vatican. You know, they're bureaucrats who don't get moved out. And so these ideas stay entrenched. A lot of people think that's a great idea. And a lot of people think, well, that doesn't leave any room there for me in the equation, or, changes to deal with. We're losing, the Catholic Church, they say the population is growing so fast in the Catholic Church, but I think it's hit a point, and the number of priests haven't kept up with the growing population. But our population is also an aging population, especially in the Catholic Church and all churches, Jewish churches, or Jewish temples, Lutherans.
Nobody to replace
Younger
them.
people aren't coming in
Okay.
because
So
they're
they'll die off on their own.
well,
It's-
they want their spiritual guidance through these in 12-minute bursts, and so
they ain't reading any books.
well, because they become complacent and they become all these other things we talked about. They got fat on the land, and so they're disregarding their need for spirituality in their lives. So it's all going to be changing. So, but I want Alex to dive back in here to the 1940s perspective and just think about how accurate these things are.
Yeah, well, Father Noel was saying that looking for a platform of peace where people can relate as children of the same Heavenly Father, destined for the same blessed eternal, another heaven, the citizens of heaven. And so the basis of peace has to be, is what he's saying, through Christianity, and particularly through the Roman Catholic Church. And there was France during the Revolution, the King of France was pretty much prompted by our Lord to consecrate France to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, to avoid this revolution from completing itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the King of France did not do that. It's a consecration. Why would the King of France not do that? And then the implication was the slaughter. And you were saying it was the beginning of one world order.
Well, it was one of the beginning seeds of ideology about that to bring everybody under. But that eliminated God, and that's why he didn't do the consecration.
Why?
Because he wasn't feeling it. He was like, well, that's
didn't
okay. He didn't believe it. He
They
was
chopped his head off, by the way.
well, decisions, actions have consequences, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But isn't that familiar with what we're being asked in this day and age in terms of Our Lady of America,
Well,
Fatima, Lords? I mean, it's always been the same thing,
Well,
right?
people, when Our Lady's asking for purity of our children, and you have these competing influences, and the children are saying, well, what about my games and things like that? Their Xboxes or well, no,
Can
it's
we
very,
bring
very
them to
important.
heaven? You got any Xboxes?
Well, it's incredibly important to their culture because this is how they find their entertainment.
right,
This is how they spend their idle time, and they got a lot of it.
right,
And some of it's productive, most of it is not.
right.
But this is what they regard and esteem because the other things have lost their way with them because they're not attractive to them.
The only thing that I found, like with my grandkids, they're attracted to school because of the socialization.
Mm-hmm.
And they got their phones and they do their thing. The only other thing that they're really attracted to, sports.
Good.
I mean, at 4 years old, they're into it.
Yeah.
And they're looking at the coach. And my grandson went for wrestling, and he's actually doing wrestling moves at 4 years old. My kid, and a good coach, right? I think there was a local kid, was a state champion, is teaching these kids. And the discipline, I'm amazed because I thought these phones are going to completely knock them out of the box, right?
Yeah.
They love sports.
Yeah, but when they get done with that, they're right back to that.
Yeah.
It's like I said, you want to see a mother or a teenager freak out in Walmart, take away their kid or their phone.
Yeah, their parents have, Jimmy and Alex they got to limit it for them, and they limit it.
Yeah, you need to, because it can be a depressant.
It's almost like a hypnotism.
Well, it's an isolation element, and that's why people today, younger people, are expressing feelings of isolation and not having connections. They have likes, but they don't have anybody call them. You know the difference between an acquaintance and a friend?
No.
An acquaintance won't come and help you move your sofa.
Yeah, you better have some friends, right? Yeah, I've often thought of who's going to move this stuff. So I'll die, leave it.
That's why you're going to die and just leave it,
Yeah, you figure it out. It's what you're getting this money for, you know what I mean? It's
money. You got money, hey. So what was Noel suggesting after this? So he's talking, we got a spiritual need.
Yeah, he's talking about communism and fascism. This was being fed to the people. That in that particular period where you're saying dependent, and then they become in bondage, and that's certainly what happened in Russia. What happened in Germany is that they became dependent and despondent, and then they're fearful to open their mouth because you were looking at getting shot in the head and the rest of your family if you opened your mouth. People won't even talk to you now just because you offend them that you have information they don't want to hear.
Or you wear a hat, or you voted a certain way.
Yeah, make America great again. Who do you think,
Well, I'm saying skip making America great again. Let's make the world great again.
Yeah.
Why stop at America? But you have to start somewhere. You have to have a strong house before you can build a strong neighborhood. This is important building blocks. If you want to change your world, start with your own home. Build a strong home, take care of your yard, now work on the neighborhood, take it over to the next neighborhood, build out. That's what God does. God builds, the devil destroys.
Interesting you say that. Father Noel said, what a wonderful opportunity America has had to foster the old-fashioned patriotism in the schools of this nation, and what little advantage has been taken of this opportunity. He said, since the patriotism can best be built on religious foundation, which is true, what a blunder has been made in keeping religion out of school curriculum as something which is of no concern to the nation.
Which is what had started in the 1915 project in Gary, Indiana.
Unbelievable.
To remove God and the family from the curriculum. Yeah. They perfected it in Gary in 2 years, and then they took it to New York City and put it across the entire school system, and now it's a model for the entire nation. Yeah,
tell us again how that worked, what they were trying to do.
Well, they were trying to eliminate the presence of God or the presence of family in their thinking and guidance in the school system. So they want to remove the presence of mom and dad, for kids to be honorable in those family relationships, and having God as anyone to aspire to. Because God was not a concept that they could teach or wanted to teach, because it would go against their ultimate goal of creating this dependence upon the state of which you just spoke, that happens under these stricter, tighter regimes. Because nothing is more concerning to a governor than a free-thinking individual, and somebody who loves their liberty and works around their liberty. Because as we see, liberty begets things. When people are free to go out and create and do things, good things happen. Historically, all throughout man's existence on earth, it was documented in the 8 stages we talked about there. And these are cycles that repeat themselves in our human condition, just under different situations.
Correct.
And I'm trying to look for what are the trends and what are we seeing, what has happened in the past, and what are we seeing now.
Yeah.
And so, like with these different stages, it's important to realize, are you in the state of apathy, which I think is what we're at now, because when you're in a state of apathy, everything's allowed. In the incredible things.
They're not stepping up to even the
most men
basic.
Having babies.
Right.
I want to see that one.
Right, yeah. And people believe that.
Yeah.
Well, they should.
Well, they do, because they've changed the meaning of the words. So they're working with a different vocabulary than the rest of the world. but you have to bend to them because you're the bad guy, and they want to use this virtue upon you that you're not human if you're not believing what they say. So this is all part of the tools that go with the build up to war that have been used historically in the past.
Yeah, eventually it
you
does.
have
Yeah,
to be
eventually it
careful
leads up-
about it
sure.
because it doesn't take much to go there.
Right.
Because right now with weapons or ideologies or these things, things can be delivered immediately.
Right.
It's not the old days where you got
Had to
weeks
wait.
of warning. Here comes the enemy. We
Right.
got to fortify things. No, the enemy just struck.
Right. And you can see it
Right. It just
in real
happened.
time.
Yeah.
He says at the bottom of the world's ills are moral and spiritual rather than economic and material. It's frequently publicized by statesmen and scholars, yet few of these suggest that the church, whose sole mission is moral and spiritual, whose experiences extends over 19 centuries, and which should therefore know best what remedy to prescribe and be consulted. So, what makes statesmen hesitate to call on the church for help? There are various reasons which suggest themselves, and among them are the following. They do not visualize real and concrete, but as a nebulous Christianity existing more or less vaguely in the hearts of individuals. They fear anti-Catholic and anti-Christian criticism from the groups who are hostile to the Catholic Church in particular, or the religion in general. They are obsessed with the notion that civil governments and churches should be separated. That the former should not counsel with the later. There's a growing group in every country which takes the attitude that Christianity itself has failed and that it should be superseded by that which is only that disregards the entire past, but the very idea that heaven is interested in the things of the earth. So,
People are full of themselves.
we have a broken. If you take a look at the structure of the Catholic Church and the deep state in the Catholic Church, are questionable concerns questioning the legitimacy of a pope that perhaps may not really be a pope, of the cardinals that you've interacted with personally, that have had really do not represent Christianity or Catholicism. If you talk to them, they've got the hat and the uniform. It's so broken, Larry. What aspect of the Catholic Church will rise up to begin to even address these things, that Christianity has something solid to offer, yet the representatives present it with, well, we take money, and I don't want to hear about the injustice of your nephew, and you don't know what you're talking about. Bring the kid up as a more black. I mean, the Catholic Church, perhaps during Father Noel's time, there was still residuals of that.
Yeah, well, things have changed dramatically, and this is where, but things haven't changed. Things have, but they haven't. They've changed in the influences and the substance of the arguments, but the basic reactions and actions of the people are always pretty consistent. And
Okay.
they go in these cycles.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to bring out. So
You're saying that St. Francis of Assisi could have a 20th century St. Francis of Assisi.
of course.
And they're calling Father Solange that.
Right.
That could have an impact on reversing that.
Well, if he had more of this going on for him at that time, he'd have been broader based.
Okay.
Okay. And so this is the magic button.
You can get to the people directly.
This is the ticket. This and the internet and things like that. The old days of print media and things like that, they're honorable, but they're gone as far as influence in the new people coming in. The older folks, nobody cares about. What you have to be concentrating on is your younger folks. And we got problems right now with our Gen Zs, Gen Xers, more so with the Gen Zs, because they're the ones who are the most lonely right now.
Who's the Gen Zs?
That's their 20-somethings.
Oh, that's another generation.
Yeah, I don't know what the next ones are. I don't know if it's YY or whatever. I don't know what they're coming up with.
So we were the baby boomers.
Yeah, well, I was the end of the baby boom, and yeah, there's the boomers, and there were the consumers, and things like that, and we were very much in this, apathy kind of situation. Oh, sit down, shut up. Everything's great.
Yeah.
What are you worried about?
You want communion?
No, well,
Shut up.
That's a whole other story about weaponizing communion against people who want to.
That's interesting. Sure.
Be
First time
concerned.
they're weaponizing.
They've
that's right.
weaponized the communion.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get an annulment, but keep your mouth shut
Right.
and make sure you contribute.
And don't talk about the problems in the church.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not welcome. And then now it's getting to be that donations are down so much, and we may ending up with the German model, where they're going to start charging like a subscription fee to be a Catholic.
Yeah. And then you're really not going to have any money.
Well, but what'll end up happening is if you don't pay the money, you can't come to church, and you won't have Jesus.
That's okay.
And so are we going to all experience then the spiritual communion like we did during COVID, which doesn't apply anymore now because they've lifted the COVID sanctions. So now you can't have a spiritual communion because they turned the Holy Spirit on and off.
Do you think that they're going to pay that fee, people generally, or
They
no?
do in Germany.
I know that, but you think our people in the United States would pay?
Oh, I don't know if they would or what. I don't know if they could ever get it by. But
Right. Who knows?
Who saw communion in the hand?
Yeah, I don't take it in the hand.
Well, I'm just asking, but now it's such common, but it came
I
in.
remember we used to kneel at the kneeler, and they would have,
The
Corpus
patent.
Christi. Oh, geez, you knew you were doing something.
My job as an altar boy was to
Absolutely.
make sure nothing ever
Didn't
hit
go
the
front.
ground.
That's right.
I had to follow that communion wafer all the way each time with my eyes.
It was very reverent, and it was very prayerful, and it was very holy, and we knew we were doing something extremely important.
And now you got people taking the communion and walking back to the pew like they're chewing on a gummy bear.
Well, Father Perfecano said, you're going to get communion. Don't chew it like you're chewing a piece of meat. He goes, let it melt in the...
Yeah, on the roof of your mouth.
Is that how you were taught to?
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
Well, that's the proper way, to let it slowly dissolve
Yeah.
and you not to be consumed like that. But it always irritated me when I see these people, young and old, just walking back from communion, just chewing like they're on a cud. It's just, it's disrespectful, but that's part of the slippery slope. And that's what happened really with the start of communion in the hand, is this disregard and this apathy, not only in our world, but in our church.
And I don't like
Our
the
practices.
stopping in the middle of the mass and hugging each other. I mean, I don't mind that I hug people a lot of times. Just in general is.
Well, you're checking to see if they got a fat wallet.
Nah, but I don't like, we're stopping, get the sign of peace, we're doing this, we don't know what to do. And people go up and they get the host, and they want to be reverent, so they look at the empty...
Tabernacle?
yeah, the Lord's right here, folks, you know what I mean? And they want to bow. But what they're saying is that we want to show our respect. We want to do something that shows that we acknowledge extra special event of the Holy Eucharist, but...
We used to do it. You used to get on your knees and take it only on the tongue.
That's right.
That was pretty reverent.
That was reverent. It says, Father Noel says, it is a complete mistake to think that we can bring religion up to date by making it conform to our wishes and to the dominant prejudices of the moment. If we feel that modern society is out of touch with science, we do not call on the scientists to change their views and to give us something more popular. We realize that we have got to give more thought and more work to science. In the same way, the great cause and decline of religion is that we have lost touch with it, either by abandoning religion altogether or by contenting ourselves with a nominal outward profession that does not affect our daily life or our real interest. And the only way to bring religion into touch with the modern world is to give it first place in our own thought and in our own lives.
My mom had a rule in her house growing up. My mom's mom died when my mother was 6 years old. She died of the flu in 1932.
Boy.
And she had just had a baby, so the baby died too.
Gee.
And a terrible hardship. But Pops, my grandfather, who I never met, but I kind of wish I did, very much so, and I spent a lot of time drilling down with my mom still. She's 99 years old. But I ask her about these things. Tell me about my grandfather. What was he like? What did he think about? She says, he was a farmer. He was just working, and we were in the Depression, and life was hard. She says, but we were never cold and we were never hungry.
Wow.
And those are the two things that were main goals.
He started chopping wood and planting food and harvesting it, right?
Right. So his family was warm.
Wow.
And they ate.
Jeez.
They didn't have the best of clothes all the time, but
Yeah,
they weren't
much.
naked, but they were, taken care of.
That's what our Blessed Mother says. You need a roof over your head, you need food, and I think a faith.
Right. And so this is the last thing that my grandfather then drilled into the kids. He would always say, you work 8 hours, you sleep 8 hours, you've got 8 hours to play. And that's what makes a successful day. Now, your 8 hours of play involve your chores,
Yeah.
your
Prayer.
homework,
Yeah.
and your prayer life.
Okay.
Okay? And so there was an hour each day
He's a holy man.
that was dedicated to observance of God and thanking God.
Wow.
Even in the midst of all this misery that a
Unbelievable.
lot of people thought they were
He
going
was a
through.
very
But they
holy
prayed a full rosary together every day.
And there you go.
Not just the
No, I
five.
hear
They
you,
did
yeah.
all 15,
That was
plus the other things. But he ran a tight ship without the benefit of his dear wife at that time. He did get remarried, and then they had, kind of a tough situation where the stepmom was not treating his kids so well, but her kids were treated. So it was like a Cinderella kind of
Yeah,
thing.
no kidding.
So my mother and my aunt both left home at the ages of 16 and 15, respectively. And so my mom was kind of on her own, living in town, lived in an apartment or a room with my aunt, and she worked at the diner and went to school. And when she wasn't in school, she'd run over to the diner and work, and then was back and forth. Thankfully, it was only like 4 or 5 blocks apart.
Right.
But she was always running between going and doing dishes at the diner and stuff like that.
She's a special woman.
Well, she was surviving. This is what they did, and so she made enough money to, get her shoes and things like that she needed, and she saved up enough money to start her first year of nurses training when she got out, because she knew that she was
Is
going to
that
be a
right?
nurse. Yeah, so she self-supported through her earnings at the diner to get herself the money to.
Where'd she go to school for nursing? Yeah.
She ended up going to up in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
Wow.
A group of nuns up there ran a hospital, and they had a teaching hospital, and that's where she learned her nursing.
It's amazing.
And then she became a VA nurse during the war, and helped take care of the amputees coming back. She was out in Palo Alto, California,
Jeez.
and dealing with all these amputees coming back, getting off the boats, and they would, do what they could to rehab them and keep them from dying from infections and things like. Infections were always a problem. They were just so happy that they had antibiotics at this point.
Sure, that came out
Yeah,
during the World War
they had
II. didn't it?
penicillin, and they could work with that. And penicillin saved so many lives.
Wow.
So
The
it
mother's
was
special.
incredible. But she never bitched about it. She said, "This is just how it was. We were all in tough
Well, her
circumstances."
temperament, you can see, even today is very, well, this is what it is, and she's resolved, and she has forbearance. She suffers quietly. She always had the best intentions for people that are around her, and
She wants people to succeed, and that's what we need to do. We need to root for each other.
she does it in a very quiet way too. She's able to project. It's like her life is a prayer in and of itself.
Well, it
when
is.
comes to people. So.
All your day is a prayer, if you make it. And she taught me that. That's why I had my prayer boots, and I had that.
And with
Disagree with
Mr.
Ferdinand.
Ricanti, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's my prayer. Everybody's a little bit different.
Well, you tell him what Ferdinand was.
Yeah,
Carpet on
put
me
your
about-
hands like that. Ferdinand, not everybody does that. I mean, I do it. I got to put my boots on, mow the lawn, and say the rosary in my mouth or something. What do you want from me? It's
Well, I told him. I said if I stood like this for hours each day praying, I said I wouldn't get any work
you
done.
won't go home, right? Yeah.
I said I'll leave that for you idle guys to do that. I said I've got work to do. I got ladders to and things like that. But I would make my efforts an act of prayer, each day. And I did that when I put my boots on in the morning. I laced them up. And I said, Lord, please take care of me and all my men
That's right.
working today, that none of us get hurt. We do your work, that you drive towards us.
Right. Right.
Let us do it with a happy heart.
Well, it seems to be that this is what he's saying, is that it has to take place through
But this is an attitude that is
our
gone.
lives. Yeah.
It's
Nobody's,
gone.
I don't think the younger generation even prays. I mean, I don't even know if they know what the Our Father is, or the Hail Mary, or the Lord's Prayer. I don't know if they know it, or have any desire to even pray, or even who to pray to.
Well, they thought COVID was a pain, but they didn't go through the oil embargo in 1972. I tried telling people, at 72, I was 12 years old, and I still had lawns to mow, and I needed gas to put into my lawnmower. But I had to stand in line with all the cars,
Get your gas.
a half a mile with my two
Okay,
5-gallon cans.
Is that right?
No one would let me cut in line
I wish I had a
to get-
picture of that.
to get my.
Oh, they wouldn't let you for the
No, I had two 1-gallon cans.
You got to be kidding me. They
I had
wouldn't
to
let you.
stand in line with everybody
Jeez.
else. Oh yeah,
How long did it take you to get for the half a mile long?
4 hours.
Oh God, Larry,
It'd be a whole afternoon to go get 2 gallons of
that's
gas.
priceless.
Because at that time, you couldn't take cans with you to fill up if you're filling up your car, because everyone would start getting on you. Hey, hoarder, honk, honk, honk.
So, but you could walk up individually and fill.
If I waited behind the Oldsmobile in front of me,
Jesus,
breathe those fumes the
was
whole
this
way
in
down.
Decatur that you had to wait?
It was Fort Wayne,
Jeez.
but it was like that everywhere.
How long did that last? That line, waiting in line. Do you remember?
It lasted all the summer. I know that for me, but I think it was about an 8-month deal where the shutdown and people were having these long lines and no one was driving anywhere at that time.
So yeah, sure. You just right,
Yeah, you stayed home
home.
and conserved.
right.
You
I'm not
walked
standing in
places.
line for it.
Bicycles got to be really common again.
I
But
remember being in Boston, went to the Berkeley School of Music to see a couple of buddies that went to school, and it happened at that particular weekend we were there.
mhm.
But the lines didn't start getting real big. It was finding a gas station, and I think because it was on a Sunday or something, we could find a gas station. Nobody was really traveling on Sunday in Boston. But we were coming back on the New York State Thruway from Boston Turnpike through Albany, New York State Thruway. There wasn't one gas station on the Thruway that had any gas.
Yeah, that was a common thing.
We had to get back on one tank of gas, and I think
Yeah.
it was the fumes that got us back into.
And you weren't alone, because there were cars just littered along the highway. A lot of times
They ran out of gas.
out, or even in the lanes. People didn't even have the.
I feared to look to see the cars that were on the side, because we could have been one of them.
Well, some of them were just left right in the lanes.
Oh, they were?
Yeah. If people didn't have a place to pull over, they just ran out there. It was just all over the place.
Jeez.
It was like the living dead out on the roads, and it was crazy. But we'd take our bicycles and go out and ride along the highway and check the cars and stuff like
See
that.
something you might be able to.
Well, seeing if there was gas cans or anything like that, we were looking for anything to try to help our situation. I mean, I was 12 years old, but I needed gas to mow the lawns because the grass kept growing, and so I'd be at the gas station like at sun up. I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be standing in line.
To get your gas. For
Right,
your-
because
for
there'd
your work.
already be a line.
Was it 1 gallon, 2 1-gallons? or
Yeah,
something?
I could carry 2 1-gallon cans.
Well, there you go. There's a memory when he was 12 years old of deprivation.
Well, but of strategy, and not complaining because everyone was in the same boat.
Yeah, to get out of it. Yeah, probably.
Right.
Of course, then gas went from 35 cents to 75 cents.
Oh, it was terrible.
Then there was plenty of gas available.
Well, I remember when I first started.
We'll
buying,
take 75 cents now if you.
I started buying gas. It was 28 cents a gallon.
Well, it's through deprivation. Well, you're right. We figure out ways to make it work and to make it happen. And work was a part of it. And to go through 4 hours of waiting to be able to work. I mean, most people don't want to work. I can't find anybody that wants to mow my. Nobody's knocked on my door. Can I mow your lawn?
Yeah, that's odd.
I mean, where are they? Where are the kids that want to enterprise in this? They're not around. I used to make my money by mowing lawns.
No, it's just not anymore. Now, if the kid wants to make $20, the parents will just give it to him.
And that's it.
Yeah, I couldn't get people to work for me back when I was an auctioneer
Jeez.
because I'd be paying like $50 for, the half a day or whatever. The parents say, "No, you want $50? I'll give you $50. I don't want you going working, and
What? To learn something
they might
about
learn
life?
something." I know. I
Yeah.
mean,
Geez, this might make you a man. No way. We'll just give you
well, the
money.
parents thought it would be demeaning for their kid to be working for an auctioneer, and a lot of people considered me a lot of times to be one step above a junk man, but they never knew what my art collections and things like that were. They always despised or looked down on me, but they didn't realize.
There's treasures. Yeah, a lot of treasures there. Yeah.
Yeah, there's things everywhere, and a lot of times people don't value them, but you say, from a different viewpoint, so I can use that. I got a place for that. So,
Yeah.
but life changes, the situations change, but the people don't. Tough people survive, and that's why I keep telling people: you got to know who you are, and you got to simplify things, and you got to be willing to work for it. I think most of the people who watch this particular offering online are of that same mindset, but they need to be more vocal about people around you and be encouraging to them. When you see somebody who's doing something enterprising and doing something well, give them good regard for that. Tell them, hey, that's a really good idea. We used to do stuff like that back when I was a kid, but your thoughts on this is really good.
Like that one young man you were
encourage them.
That one young man you were talking about that had that sense of being introspective and asking questions and investigating and wanting to engage the world in a way that most people perhaps.
What are you talking about? The kid that wants to be a doctor and then a priest?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a kid.
Well, he's this kid. If he ends up being the one who brings us all together, I wouldn't doubt it a bit.
You would say he has the attributes of a.
He's got everything. He's asked all the right questions going into this. He's got the right temperament. He has heroic virtue all over him. I mean, this kid is such an accomplished young man, but he always gives the credit to those around him, which is one of the first lessons of humility and leadership you need to have. Is you never take credit for things. You always pass it on to the nearest person to you. Call attention to them. Take it off of you, put it onto them. Everyone knows that you did it, but it shows a great sense of character if you pass it along to the next guy.
Sure it does. I mean, and he means it too. He's not just using it superficial. He's gaining information and knowledge from other people. Dr. Reif, who was a scientific genius, but he didn't know everything. So, he would go to professors at University of Chicago that were experts in a particular area, and he would ask them. And he would collaborate with them. And, of course, his science was now elevated higher because of the other person. But Father Noel has a interesting comment on the future of Christianity. Shall I read it?
Yeah, I want to know what he's... So you think Christianity's going to last?
I'm going to hold you in suspense for a minute. So the Christianity of the future must be...
You just got to turn it off. You're getting all those phone calls.
Okay.
They want to mow your lawn.
The Christianity, the future of Christianity must be a social Christianity that is embodied in a real society, not
social Christianity. Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. It has to be
that is embodied in a real society, not an imaginary or an invisible one. And this society must not be merely a part of the existing social and political order, like the established churches of the past. It must be an independent and universal society, not a national or a local one. The only society that fulfills this condition is the Catholic Church, the most ancient yet at the same time the most adaptable of all existing institutions. Nothing is more remarkable than the collapse of all the efforts to create an artificial religion to meet the needs of the age. Deism, positivism, and the rest of all ended in failure. It's only a religion that transcends political and economic categories and is indifferent to material results that has the power of satisfying the need of the world.
Yeah, and the only thing I might disagree with him, 70 some years later, 80 years later, is, he was right in the fact that the Catholic Church at that time was the only thing that met those particular needs for continuity. But I would say that today, and when I was trying to reflect on my own experience here with Our Lady of America, and when Our Lady up on Holy Family Hill that day said, "Bring me my children, bring me all of my children," it wasn't in a Catholic tone that she was saying, "Bring them, bring me all of them." In a spiritual, like a social spiritual invitation to where they'll all be
Well,
together.
maybe the universal church needs to be redefined in terms of the true soul that seeks God is Catholic. That perhaps, even though you say, well,
Meaning universal.
Universal.
Right.
And even I think our Lord would probably agree with this, because even in the first century, he said to some of these people that, none of this shows the ultimate charity and love that the religion is supposed to produce. You've gotten tied up into the
Right.
Torah and the 600 rules, and I mean, that's how distorted the
They're
thing.
too worried about the legalities
Yeah.
of it than the experience.
Yeah, so I think that Catholicism goes well beyond the architecture and the corporate positions, cardinals, bishops, this and that. And
The
other thing.
administrative roles, yeah.
Yeah, our Lord didn't say, make cathedrals and bishops and I mean,
Right,
He didn't say that. I mean, this is so far. I mean, take a look at we'll do more on St. Joseph next week, but take a look at St. Joseph.
But I bring that up and says, well, God loves a beautiful building to him and all like that. I said, he does. I said, I thought he had an issue with the golden calves and stuff like. Well, the golden calves weren't for him, and I said, yeah, but he had more of importance to spend that energy and those dollars on taking care of each other. I'm okay.
Larry, at one time the Vatican was built for him, but the Vatican is no longer built for God.
Well, there's an administration that's in there that we talked about, sort of the deep state that's there as well. I mean, that's the
God exists
term
whether
you
the
gotta go.
Vatican's there or not. You
Right.
think this is what well, Jesus, if I lose the Vatican, I mean,
Where's God going to live?
Where's he gonna
He's
live?
going to live right here, baby.
All right.
He's going to live right here.
Yeah. And
All right.
Valtorta said, "You will be my living and walking cathedrals."
And I never read the book.
So I think that we have to look at the universal religion. It really is based on love of God.
Exactly. So this community that has to be bought, this is the purity I think that Our Lady is asking for. This purity of her children of America to lead the world is not about one specific religion. It's having God and that spirit in here, which guide what church you go to, or if
Right.
you don't even go to a church.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Because so many are not going to go to churches. They're going to go to reference points on here.
It's like you said to that one guy, he said, I don't believe in God. Well, you believe in God more than you think, you know what I mean? The guy that said when you named your corporation after...
Oh, yeah, when he said, no, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God.
You were telling him,
Yeah.
Wait a minute, I've met a lot of people. You seem to have a lot of love for other people, a lot of insights in the betterment of people.
Well, he was doing things because he knew it was the right thing to do, and there was going to be, he'd be questioned on it, if not just from himself. And I said, you're more Christian than you allow. I said, you're more Christian than most people out on the street. I
There
said,
you go.
And I told him, I said, you know what? You're damn near Catholic. And that scared him. Boy, he got some hop in his step right then. Oh, you ain't going to call me that. And I said, then, you got to own it. But he was just a wonderful
No, and I think
guy,
that
very charitable.
that concept and the way he was living is really what's universal in terms of religion. Because if we don't end up in whatever religion we're in, we end up in despising and hatred and materialism.
Yeah, we certainly didn't practice it very good.
There was a guy that he was engineer, and he was very. This is how you do it. You fulfill this in the
Yeah,
Catholic
very
Church.
regimented. Yeah.
And so he has an experience where he's in hell, and our Lord comes to him, And our Lord says,
Oh, this is a story type.
it's a story. Yeah. Well, guy tells his story. All right.
Okay.
He said, look, you can come to heaven if you want. He goes, but you don't have a very good place in heaven because you fulfilled all the,
Checked all the boxes.
checked all the boxes. He goes, well, I got to tell you something. He goes, your kids aren't going to make it. He goes, and so he says to the guy, you want to come or you want to go back? And the guy says, I'll go back. He goes, that's what I wanted to hear. You'll go back for your children? Yeah.
Got to go back and fix it before it's too late.
There you go. You know what I mean? So do you have any capacity to help those children other than filling all the blanks?
Yeah. But a lot of people have been told by the system that that's the measure of success. That you check this box, you check that box, you check that box. But no one's checking the kid to see how the kids...
box of love, yeah.
Right, how the kid's framework of love for his community and each other goes, and do they have regard for anyone else?
Yeah.
And this is where you got the dysfunctional households and the lack of care, concern, and discipline that's in there. And so you get these kids out there, and the parents as well are off the hook because they've given themselves a pass on this because, it's okay, it's good enough.
Right.
But it's not good enough in the long run.
Right.
And so it's better to be held accountable now than to try to
work it out over after the
to try to negotiate later.
Right. Yeah. So I think that unfortunately that we're in the state that we're in terms of the bureaucracy that runs things, not only politically but even in the Catholic Church. So I can speak for myself. I love our faith. I love the sacraments and the faith. And I'm not judgmental, but for those that do less or that mean harm to, if they're priests or bishops or popes that have hatred in their heart, I don't feel any obligation to put up with them.
Well, you got to call them out, and hopefully they'll change. Hopefully they'll take that as a kind sort of correction and not an anger one. And it's not to say, you suck or something like this to tell people, or you're terrible. It says, I'm just very disappointed. I was expecting a different response. And a lot of times just saying that is, I'm very disappointed in your response or your actions. And, I understand you're probably feeling you're doing the right thing, but it's just very disappointing to me to see this going on.
You did that to that archbishop that was involved in your nephew.
Oh, I was a little more aggressive with him. I mean, he really pissed me off, and that was just it was a real jackass thing for him to have said.
It was a moment of when our Lord turned the tables over.
Well, yeah, I mean, some things are just not right, and this guy was not reflecting what I felt was what we were expecting.
Do you have any regrets the way you?
Heck no. Heck no.
No, but really, he's talking about
what this guy is.
Two different things.
Night, baby.
Right.
I mean.
Yeah, but he's right on the other end. Is that if people aren't that hateful or so far gone or what they call wicked, and you approach people and you treat them right and fairly, sometimes they do. They understand that you're approaching them with kindness and a chance for them to rethink what they're doing. And but they got to do it on their own. But we don't put any roadblock by, again, beating them over the head with the Bible or with a hammer.
Well, a cudgel isn't going to work because a lot of these people who have got this power position right now, they don't feel like they've done anything wrong because they've been promoted by the team that put them in place, for a reason. So they figure they've got it all worked out. You're the problem. But they don't see, it's the old log in the eye, versus the speck, type of thing. They're not seeing that because they're not paying attention to what our Blessed Mother has said multiple times.
And over.
Right. And why does she have to keep repeating herself?
Because we're in trouble, and we're getting deeper in trouble.
we're not. We're not in trouble. We're
not responding.
We're denying, and we're saying we got this apathy going on. Everything's fine. We don't need that. No, she didn't really mean that. Well.
Yeah, you wonder how they can process.
Why does she keep repeating it? and we're talking about her.
She keep.
Well,
hey, what's another for you?
Well, I mean, she goes 1917. She says release this in 1960.
They don't do it right.
And she sees they're not lining it up to release anything in 1960. So in 1956, she gives them a gentle reminder in coming as Our Lady of America, and she talks to them again about their relationship with material things in the world,
and then
hoping that there'll be 4 years for them to get it straight.
And then in 1960, she goes to Garabandal.
Right.
And she asks the same thing.
Right.
And then Vatican II comes out when? 1962, 1960, 62?
It was 68, I thought, went into force.
Well, that's when it really went into force, but I mean,
I don't know when they started. Father Abel said it started back previous to the war.
Yeah, even before the war.
Because he saw it going on at the Vatican when he was over there studying.
Did he? Did he see a lot of liberalism?
He said this is not good.
Did he?
This whole group thought this is not good. They saw the slippery slope.
So how's this going to end? You were put in charge of helping our Blessed Mother with Sister Millie's. When she died, you were put in charge, so to speak.
Well, I don't know about that.
Well,
a lot of people
you were given a position to do something to preserve, promote.
I was given a request to bring her children, and I feel that my request was to gather not just the Catholic kids, but all kids and kids of all ages.
Well, at this particular juncture, you have heaven, you have the podcast to try to reach out.
Well, the podcast, all I can really do is to talk about things that I see or that I feel that are adding up and of some consequence.
And bring it to the table.
Right, and people can digest it or they can, throw it away. It's not for me. It's not my responsibility to save their souls.
Yeah, sure. Right. Only God. Right.
Yeah.
Only God can do that.
Yeah. This is their free will. I can't change that. I can just show them that there is an opportunity and an option to change. And I'm a big believer in change. And that's why I always taught my young athletes, we all make errors. No one on the team, battles you because you made an error on a play or something like that. They've forgotten it and the situation stands. Forgive yourself. Don't keep kicking yourself because you just bring yourself down as a player. If you keep hauling that error around with you, say, we all mess up. Okay, let's get back to winning this game. And that's the fortitude. That's that little bit of virtue. It's like being the hero in the gunfight. Takes one in the wing, but he switches to the other hand and he starts fighting left-handed, and
my grandson Frankie can't stand to lose. He can't stand it. I said, well, then you got to work at it. If you want to be a winner,
well, if he wants to be a wrestler, he better be doing this. Well, yeah, you're going to have to. He's going to find out when he takes some of those defeats. But like I said, defeats and failures in the process of trying are good things. That's why I thought baseball was such a great sport.
Oh,
because
if you wanted a relationship with my father, 50 years in the Mohawk Valley Umpires Association, you had to have something to do with baseball. He was a very quiet man. The only time he'd really come out, he would talk about baseball, different people that he met. And I think he had a game, Pee Wee Reese and some of the big ball players were traveling around, and they were in Okinawa. He was a third base ump for them when they were doing that.
Doing their show games and stuff like that.
Doing their show games, that was just... And he had a chance to go to the big leagues, but he had family obligations. He didn't want to go.
You were holding him back.
Basically, we did. But him and Bobo Salerno, all those guys. Salerno wanted to start a union for the Umpires Association. I think they tossed his ass out. But my father, he did semi-pro. He did a little league.
I looked at all this stuff. I was at the house. We went to visit him at that time. It was like, wow, this guy, he was a lifer when it came to the umpiring.
Yeah. Well, but if you take a look at the game of baseball, they call it a national. What do they call it?
National pastime.
I mean, if you go to a ball game, there's something very special in that stadium that people feel.
Well, there's an optimism. There's an optimism in the crowd because it goes on for so long, and every inning, every pitch can be that moment, and they're all waiting on it. And so there's this optimism of the potential. And that's why, as a catcher and having been a ball player, I never gave up, until the last out. I mean, even if there was one strike left, we still had a chance. And I've seen rallies with 2 outs in the bottom of the ninth, getting down to the last strike, and all of a sudden the guy hits a crushing, triple.
And the crowd rises.
And the crowd rises up, and the other pitcher loses his mojo. And then all of a sudden, just the rally comes in, and that pitcher gets knocked off the mound, and then they throw in the bat boy to come and pitch at you because they're out of arms, and he comes in there, and you blister him, and you end up putting 9 runs on the board in the bottom of the ninth inning and walk off, and everyone says, "What happened?" Baseball just happened. You're never done till you're done.
All right.
And that's how life is. Leave it all on the table. Don't quit. Don't say, "Oh, I can't do that."
They say that your experience in sports, and the coach often tell you, this is what you're experiencing now is you're going to be replaying in life. Is it unfolds? So this is not just a
you think
game
this is tough. Wait till life comes and kicks you in the ass.
Right.
Because this is going to get you ready for that. Realize. And it's survivable in spite of yourself.
Have you been to Cooperstown?
Yeah, a couple times.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you just sit there and you look at these things and you wonder, that was a bat he held. That was in the 56th game and the streak. Thinking about DiMaggio and his stuff. And a lot of people don't realize what a tough ball player Joe DiMaggio was. He was just all around.
He had good.
He's a good guy. He and his brother. The whole family was good.
Right.
And at that time, I had a chance to sit and talk with him in his hotel room. I was got that pinball glass signed.
I remember that special.
It was just like looking at a tired man that was my hero of one of my heroes, my idols that I looked at, and I never saw him play, but in replays, and so he was done by the time I came of age.
Was he joyful that you knew the nuances of?
Oh yeah, he was joyful of my college coach because they were buddies.
Oh really?
Yeah, he and Danny Litweiler were old friends, and so
wow.
He was talking about Danny, and I said, well, we always called him Skip. He says that guy, he could chew tobacco. I said, yeah, and he wore it all down his shirt.
Is that right?
Yeah. Danny was he was a wonderful guy. We always called him Skip, but he'd sit in the dugout and he'd spit, and a lot of times his spit didn't go.
He looked like a Sicilian.
You should have seen his shoes. We were all wearing white shoes,
Jeez.
but not him. He had brown ones.
Wow.
But he was a great guy. But Danny Litweiler was a left fielder for the St. Louis Browns back in the day, and he set the record for having an errorless season.
Gee.
Made no errors in a season playing left field, which is kind of tough to do. And so it was getting down to the last 3 weeks of the season, and Danny had this streak going on, and so everyone was worried about, is going to make it through the last 3 weeks of the season and not have an error? They're going to sit down and not play. He said, no, I'm going to play every game, blah, blah, blah. He got with the groundskeeper, and he had to start raising the blade on the lawnmower when he got to left field. He could cut it low in center and left center, but if it got to left field, he had to raise the blade up a little bit so the grass was taller in left field.
Why?
That would slow the ball down so it didn't get past him.
Oh.
And so he could just walk over and pick it up and throw it in. And so it got to be the joke in the major leagues that you had to go out and play in Danny's field.
Wow.
Not the outfield, but Danny's field, which was all this high grass.
Wow.
It would slow the ball down coming through because he didn't want to have that last.
Where'd you learn all these stories?
Well, he told me about them. And talking about that. So there were folklore, but there was no rules about it at that time. So the groundskeeper just would raise the blade when he got so far across the outfield grass, so that Danny's grass was higher, it would slow the ball down.
That's wild.
They called it Death Valley. Yeah. The balls would go out there to die. A grounder would die in left field. Danny would have to run in to pick it up. It wouldn't roll to him. It wouldn't have enough gas to get to him.
Oh, my gosh. That's wild.
But he got his error-free season. I think his record still stands. But,
well, they were must have been just very beautiful private experiences for you.
Oh,
especially to meet Joe DiMaggio, because I'll say that he was married to Marilyn Monroe. Of course, Marilyn had some problems, and when she died, I mean, all whether it was the Kennedys or who they were, they all looked the other way. not Joe DiMaggio. Joe
No,
DiMaggio gave her a proper burial, and I think
she
every
always
week,
got roses. She's got flowers every week.
every week. The guy was, he's an upstanding first class guy.
Oh, he loved the woman. She just wasn't lovable.
Right. She's damaged.
She was damaged. Yeah, the world had damaged her. She just couldn't believe in love for herself. She thought it was wonderful, but she couldn't accept it or understand it and take it. And sometimes, that's just a hard thing. It's hard for us to allow somebody to love us.
Yeah, that was a spiritual
Death.
for him, wasn't
Right.
it? Yeah.
That's I talk about, spiritual deaths. That we are resurrected from our spiritual deaths. We have but one physical death, but we have many spiritual deaths in our lives. And this is a sign of the wonder of God's presence in our lives, that we come back from these things and be resilient, and we can find hope and laughter again.
After that, yeah.
Right. But this guy, you could see there was an ultimate emptiness.
Is
in
that
him.
right?
Yeah. And I see this a lot in a lot of people around us. They're not just isolated, they're empty.
Wow.
And that's why you see these people out in the street right now protesting so much.
Right.
And
Empty.
they're empty. They don't even know why they're protesting.
Right.
They don't know the facts of why they're angry.
Unbelievable.
They're just angry because everyone says they're supposed to be angry. So this can't be this new social religion that we were talking about.
Right.
And that's what a lot of the woke group and these ideologies are trying to make this anger about whatever they say it should be and not knowing what it is.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah. You
Well,
don't even know why you're
this is becoming like this new religion.
right.
This new.
So they're feeling something, and they think that's God, or that's religion, or that's.
Well, they're not
purpose.
feeling God. They're not calling it God. They're just saying it's.
But they're embracing it like they're.
Well, they're trying to say, but they're not giving it to God. They're saying, this is you're hurting me. You're trying to shut me down and blah blah. No, we're trying to enrich you and build you up.
Yeah, that conversation never goes anywhere with them on the street.
No, because they're angry about something they're not angry about. They don't know why they're angry. They're just told to be angry, and so this is how they've, given up. They've given up their will to somebody else's direction, and this is when they become subordinate to the state, and this is what the Archbishop was concerned about. This is what the Monsignor Pope was concerned about. And these things with the 8 stages to the decline of a nation, the civilization. These things happen, and they're happening now.
Yeah, well, we're at a critical point, and certainly, God's in control, and the only thing we can do is what we're doing, is to pray, get the word out, talk about more joyful things. I mean, you talk about Larry's experience with Joe DiMaggio. Wasn't that uplifting for people to hear that? And that's really what we're about. We need to get back to it. So. Well, we'll continue to do what we can do in terms of the research.
We'll try calling these things out and try to help people get through some of these questionable times and the practices that are going on, but realizing no matter what somebody else may say and try to make you feel bad about it, you got to know who you are and have confidence in that and stand on that rock.
Right.
This is what we call principles.
Right.
And this is what drives you, and this is what gives you courage to move forward. So it's time for courage, people. It's time for celebrating, the good.
That's right.
Quit worrying so much about the bad things. The bad things are always going to be there, but if you give them too much credit, they will take over you. Keep concentrating on the good things. And
That's right.
Remember throughout the day to thank God, for, even the little things. If you thank Him for the little things, the big things take care of themselves.
That's right.
And this is where we've kind of lost our way, but I think this is where that social agreement you had talked about, whether it be a religion or just a way of thinking and a pattern of positivity,
Right.
I think can be that start to bring people together.
Oh, absolutely.
Because,
The whole thing has been grounded in individuals' invitation to love God and to be carried into our hearts.
mm-hmm.
That's how these things go down. That's how they happen. That's how the world is transformed through the love of God, and us allowing God to love the world through us. So it's up to Him, but we have to do the things you're talking about. We can't just be lethargic. We can't be impersonal. We
No,
can't,
be active.
Yeah.
Take an active role in things. See something that needs to get done, take it upon yourself, do it. And bring somebody along with you. Say, hey, look, Mrs. Wilkins down the way, her gardener won't show up, let's you and I go down there. Let's clean her place up this weekend. You with me?
That'd be nice.
Sure. these types of things.
Absolutely right.
Get back to being a good neighbor. Start with your own home, take care of your neighborhood, and then go out from there. It's infectious.
That's right.
When people see these things happening.
And that's what the Holy Family did.
Right.
It wasn't he could have had billions of people, applauding him as these miracles are going. It was individual, it was people. He's working with the free will and the love that he had for his creation. So
you go down to that, take a couple extra rakes with you. If somebody comes up and asks what's going on, say, hey, I got a rake here for you. Why don't you rake those beds out over there? We're going to get this place cleaned up. So it becomes a point of pride in the neighborhood again.
Yeah, and you feel good about it.
And she feels good about
That's
it
right.
because she didn't want it to be that way. She took pride when she built those things, but her body gave out on her. Her life is leaving her. But let's keep her with this beauty, this sense of self-esteem, and show her some love, back. This is called being a neighbor. This is just called being a good person. You want to start with that. It's just the right thing to do.
What are we going to be doing in the future? More of St. Joseph, I hope?
Well, I want to get more into St. Joseph. We kind of skirted along the topic there about the poverty and things like that. But those are good because it laid foundational bricks for the other things we talked about. Because that is, I think, a key element here of simplifying our lives. If buying a boat takes you away and distracts you from your obligations, then maybe you shouldn't have bought the boat.
Correct.
Okay, but the problem is that we're more concerned about the boat than we are our obligations.
Be very interesting to see how that unveils.
Oh, I'm interested to see how it's going to work out. I mean, as far as the land goes, I'm kind of indifferent either way. But the point is that it's not right, and I'm not going to get into a bully standoff about this. That's not my way.
Right.
It's but there's a way to fix these things, but he has to be a part of that too. I can't do it on my own.
Right.
So we'll figure it out.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, we're gonna get through this. So stay positive, everybody. I hope this wasn't too much, but there's a confluence of things that are happening in our world right now that have been talked about by our predecessors many, many times, and we need to understand that this isn't a unique situation. It seems troubling, and everyone wonders how we're going to get through it. But if we look back to our past to see how they got through it, there's a good indication of how we can work through things today.
Sure. Yep.
So we have to change things a little bit because the tactics and the influences are different, but we can get through this. Okay?
Absolutely.
You just have to stay smart, be calm, be patient with each other, try to show some love first for yourself and then for others around you, because if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. And let's just concentrate on these things during our Holy Week here right now and prepare for the great victory ahead, because it is a victory and it's a shared victory, so we all get a piece of this one then too. So
amen.
So in the meantime, we love you and we'll be back.